next issue is this. There was a comment that suggested that the chair position rotates among the founding municipalities upon the conclusion of one-year term. So every year, the chair position would rotate among the founding cities. So again, this seemed like something that warranted discussion and see what people thought, whether or not it should go into the bylaws.
What's the enabling statute say?
There's nothing, it's silent, doesn't address it.
Silent?
Do we vote every year on it anyway?
I think right now the officers are taking their turns. What's that? I think that's what's in the bylaws, one-year term.
Yeah, and they can be reappointed. Then rotate?
Yeah, that's not really picking. If a person's not elected, it's gonna rotate.
So what Sam's saying is he'd rather, I'd rather have a vote rather than
Yeah.
rotating.
Yeah, because if it's rotating, why are we voting?
So the county commissioners would never be.
Which would be another thing. The county commissioners were not included,
Appointees.
and so would we want to include them as possible chairs? So that's the other thing to that.
How is it now, as far as who can be the chair? Is it a founding member? Was it any one of the board members?
It's a financial, it's whatever the term is for a financial participant.
So it'd have to be a founding member or somebody who's contributing annually or had done so.
So we've only had one previous chair, so it's not,
Yeah.
Good point.
yeah, for, I don't know. how
Well,
many
and
years?
I think my concern, I mean, I'm flexible on this. I think for me, the most important thing is to have at least a consecutive term limit for the chair. I mean, if a chair gets elected 2 years in a row or 3 years, that we have some limit in there to
Absolutely.
allow, others to share that responsibility. So that's probably go ahead, I'm sorry.
So two consecutive one-year terms and then it passes.
Yeah, you can re-elect someone else. And I'm okay with it being any of the 5 that could be eligible for the chair. I mean, yes, the 3-member cities are continuing to contribute, but of course the county did contribute quite a bit in the beginning. So
Would we?
I'm just telling you.
So, yeah, I'm looking at Shannon on a couple of things.
I heard it.
Yeah.
Could we do something like we do an annual election, but that they could do a maximum of 2 consecutive?
I think
Yes,
that's,
yeah,
I think
that's
that's.
what I was
Well, that's what he
That's
said.
where we want to go.
That's a good consensus. So basically, the term limit in terms of consecutive, no more than 2, and then adding in the county appointees is also being qualified to serve as chair.
And I would
By
think,
voting, however you say that, but yeah, I mean, it just gives it flexibility.
yeah.
Doesn't mean they have to be just.
And so having spoken earlier, so we had talked about possibly, I am a term limit person because that's what we do in our city, and I'm a full believer in that. I would offer a 3-year term maximum, and those to be elected instead of just rotated.
Yeah, I think the rotating is gone.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the rotating is gone, and so now the issue is between either a 2-term limit or a 3 one-year. What do people think? Is that the difference?
Maybe I'm off. I'm positing that you have an election every year,
Yeah.
but so I'm not electing a chair for a 2-year term. I'm electing for a 1-year
Correct.
term, but they could do 2 in a row.
It's the
Okay.
term limit that can be elected no more than how many times consecutively? Twice? I think that's.
Yeah.
Okay with 3?
I'm okay with 3. I mean, I don't have a strong feeling.
Yeah.
I don't really care, so.
If y'all have a strong feeling.
I don't know if there's a hill to die on there between 2 and 3.
Tom?
Well, how does that affect, if it's only the 3 founding or county at large, how does it affect future member cities?
I think if when we add a
They would be
intermediate
in-
city, we're gonna
yeah.
have to change the bylaw.
Yeah.
Okay.
That part would be, yeah.
Well, didn't you just say that it would be one of the voting board, the chair has to be one of the voting board
Yeah.
members.
That's a great idea, using our brand new
Right,
definition.
that's what I said,
Yeah.
to make it more general, just say one of the voting board
Yeah.
members.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. But what we're doing is we're adding the county, right?
And I would think we'd wanna add this to the major decisions approval list. That this would require a 2 and a 1.
Oh,
Sorry, a 3/5 and a,
rather than simple majority?
and a simple majority.
I
For the chair.
disagree.
Yeah, I disagree.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I mean, I don't mind being the majority. I think though, we need to think, and it could be down the road, but if there's another financially participating member, I think there's gonna be a lot of facts to be determined on just, either board chair, because somebody comes in and they're, anyway, we'll discuss that.
To finish your thought, Mayor, I think we're doing this absolutely right. I think when you end up with one of those people, you're gonna do what your bylaws.
Right.
I think it's gonna send some reverberations through the whole document.
Sure.
Job security.
So just to summarize, 1-year terms, three, maximum of 3, and being one of the 5, either the founding members or the 2 voting county members.
Yeah,
Good with that?
I'm good with
That
that.
sounds good. That sounds good. Those are good, those are really good.
Real quick, just because we're on the officers, because I think there was a question before that was posed, do non-voting members, are they eligible for the other officer positions other than chair? Is that?
They're not prohibited.
Right,
So
okay.
they're not excluded from, if you chose, you now have the 2 other officer positions, right? Vice chair and secretary.
Right.
So,
Mathematically,
am I hearing that
member
right?
city will always be
Well,
having.
the only people that vote, I mean, are those people that
Correct.
vote, but they are not disqualified from holding a position.
so how does that work?
Well, there's just, we can say that the officer positions will be filled with voting members, but it doesn't say that.
Because we could potentially, I mean, based on the conversation here, we could potentially have 2 officers that can't be in the executive session,
They can't vote.
Yeah, that
and they
does-
can't vote.
Right, never mind. Yeah, we end up with that. Yeah.
I don't think
That's-
anybody intended that,
Intended what?
for officers to be non-voting members.
So you think officers should be voting members?
Yes.
Okay.
All right, let's
I do
clarify
as well.
that. You're right, that does end up with some odd results, so, yeah, that's a good catch. Okay. All right, this is not a big deal, but I want to, this is a situation where there's a meeting called, and it's called by 2 voting board members. And again, the language that was added is the stuff that's underlined at the end. And it's basically, it's really good, it's hitting a really good point, which is you don't want the 2 board members picking to have it at a time and place where someone gets intentionally excluded. I get that. The only thing, I'd like your permission to massage this language a little bit, because the only problem I have is you'd only end up in a situation with 2 board members calling a meeting if there was some problem with the chair just refusing to call that meeting. So to have language that circles back to the chair may not be optimal. So the concept is fine, but I may change this a little bit, because you don't really want to bring the chair back in if you've ended up in a situation like this.
But I'm okay with a strong chair. I mean, what we used to do is, the thing was 3 members out of the 15 could say, we want a meeting, and the chair would say, fine, but I don't have to set it. I mean, the chair had the power to, and then at the end of the year, you voted on a new chair if you could get enough votes to oust them, or you just, hey, you're the minority, tough luck. So I'm okay with a strong chair position on that. I don't know that I need to usurp it by trying to add some language there.
Well, I'm happy to take this out, and again, right now, it's completely inconceivable that you'd ever,
Yeah.
I mean, it's just inconceivable. But the problem with this provision is, if you ever do find yourself where you need it, and it's not there, then that's where you are. And I've represented entities before that it became necessary to do this.
Okay.
I'm happy to take it out if you think it's too, it's almost, kind of anticipating a problem that
True.
you wonder if it's a self-fulfilling. But
Prophecy.
anyway, do you
Take
want me to
out
take
the-
it out?
I'm the one who added the
Oh, okay.
language, and I wrote it in
Go
like
ahead,
5
Sam.
minutes, so it's not very.
The underlying language or?
Knock
No,
yourself out.
the ad.
No, we're not, we've
Yeah.
moved on from that.
Yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
Do you even want the ability of 2 board members to be able to call a meeting?
No, that's fine.
Oh, I'm sorry, okay.
I'm okay with that. I'm just saying that generally, we're gonna all get along, but
Okay, so
I
you are-
still like the position that the chair says, you know, you can call it, but I get to schedule it, or I get to put what's on the
Okay.
agenda.
I'm sorry, misunderstood.
Yeah, yeah.
It is your point.
But if you
Okay.
have that kind of fight going on for long, pretty soon you end up, you know, having different votes and stuff, so.
Why don't we leave it as it is?
Okay.
Let's make the change the way it is. I'm overthinking this. Okay, onward, Jay. This is just simply changing the commencement and the expiry of officer terms. I had it as calendar year, and someone would prefer it October through September. I assume there's a solid reason for this, and so I don't, I hope
Yes.
it's not.
Fiscal year,
Because our fiscal year.
yeah.
Is that okay with
Yeah.
everybody?
That's fine.
Good.
Okay.
Because we will have, we making so many decisions, we'll love to make one more.
Don't be sassy, Sam. Sassy Sam.
Sassy Sam. That's going in the bylaws. Okay. This is an interesting provision. Someone suggested, okay, the commissioners are that's the only entity that appoints two board members. You know, everyone else, the alternate lines up behind just one person. So the question was, could this thing be drafted in such a way that they have two alternates, but the alternates could fill in for either of the two commissioners' court appointees in the event that they're unavailable?
So, I'll speak to that a little bit to that. So, I mean, because we are such a small group and we have lots of things going on, I would hate for commissioners, the commissioners' court not to have a vote on any issue because the member and that member's alternate couldn't be there. But if, so let me just use a hypothetical, right? So, huh?
Sam and Paul couldn't be here.
Yeah,
Sassy
Sam and Paul couldn't be here, but Randall's here, and Shannon can be here, so Shannon could, I mean, it's really still commissioners' appointments, and I just felt like that way there'd be less of a chance of someone be missing and missing a vote.
I think that's a great
Yeah.
idea. I certainly don't, I don't know what the commissioners were thinking when they appointed me. But I can't imagine they thought that there was some material difference between Shannon or Paul sitting in my chair.
No.
Or mine, yeah.
Yeah.
No, they just had to appoint each of us,
Yeah.
one of you, and, you know, and we still do that, so if
Yeah.
Randall can't be here, then I would be his backup
Yeah,
technically.
yeah.
But what if I can't be here,
Yeah.
then it goes to Paul.
Yeah, I think
And
that's
the
a good idea.
commissioners were fine with that.
Yeah, no, that's good.
That's a good idea.
I thought it was
I'm
really
yeah.
sensible. Just
Oh, we're
just
okay,
have
we're
it
on
around.
Hey, Paul, quit missing me.
Okay, so Kay is
I'm here.
Can I go back to Jay?
Sure.
What was the rationale to shift that? I'm sorry.
I assume you're fiscal year.
Yeah, well, the term of office from January to fiscal.
I assume it was just to match up. Is that your fiscal year?
So I want brand new board members starting when the new budget starts. I don't know. I think by doing it in January, you get some time to learn the new budget. If you start on October 1, you kind of missed it.
Got it. I don't want to
That's-
out and out.
It's officer change.
Officers, not board members.
Oh, officer
terms,
change.
the
Not
officer
missed,
terms.
okay.
Office, yeah, officer.
So that,
Term of office.
it's just who,
You're like 1 year.
I mean, it would still, it's just a change in who the officers might be.
Assuming they have
Does that
some-
make sense?
So at the end of the fiscal year, you pass a budget, then you appoint, you elected officers.
So you would say it was an officer for like FY '20 or an officer for FY
Right.
'21.
Yeah.
See, I'm coming at it from my city hat, but they're staggered, so
And
which
we
gives you
had
time to
talked
learn
about
one.
this. Yeah, we talked about.
Okay. Just curious.
I'm not sure about this one. This is a provision where your executive director has the obligation to notify the chair if they become aware of a potential ground for removal. And what the change would do is we create that obligation also for board members. And I sort of have mixed feelings about this. So the executive director has the obligation to tell the chair
I think this relates back to an earlier discussion on, you know, that we can't quote unquote remove a board member that's appointed by another entity.
Yes, sir.
But if there are known grounds for removal, I mean, the board needs to have some kind of authority to either exclude them from voting. I mean, we have to have some, if we know that there's some malfeasance occurring, we just can't let that person have the same duties, responsibilities that they would normally have. And so I would say we've got to, and it might not do it today, but find some way to give this board some opportunity to be responsible with, you know, I mean, now, that's not saying you think something happened.
Right.
It's not an accusation it's, if you have whatever standard of proof you want to come up with, but, I mean, I think it would behoove us to at least think about it, that we can't just say, oh, City of Denton, you know, Watts did this, and y'all need to think about it. Well, if I've done something that's really egregious, I shouldn't be sitting here certainly voting on things if it's pretty clear that something occurred that I really breached a duty somewhere.
And so that would be letting the entity that appointed.
Yeah, maybe that's the word.
Well, but let's say the entity doesn't do anything. Let's say the entity says, hey, I mean, because if what we're saying is that if an entity appoints a board member, no matter what that board member does, this board has no power to take any kind of action that they deem necessary to preserve the integrity of the deliberations. I'm not sure, I mean,
So-
I know councils can't do that. Well, councils can censure but they can't ask somebody not to
Right.
deliberate, so.
And so I would think that, so let's say there was an accusation, in order to verify that accusation was accurate, I would think there'd have to be some legal findings. And then maybe if there's, you know, legal stuff going on, then we would put a temporary hold on that. But I don't think that we could just,
Sure. You
say-
could still censure or do something if you
Sure.
found it appropriate, though. You
Yeah.
just can't say, get out. Get out. Okay, all right.
This is a related issue. It's a little bit different because, and I'm a little bit concerned about it because it creates the affirmative obligation. If you all know of a grounds for removal, that you have to tell the chair about it. And I'm a little uncomfortable with that because there's obviously nothing that would keep you from telling the chair just anything.
Okay.
And I just hate creating unnecessary
So you're just trying to make the
obligations.
obligation for the executive director to
I
tell?
think it's a very appropriate obligation
Okay.
for your ED.
But it doesn't prevent anyone else from
And exactly.
Okay.
And so I would just be, I understand what's behind this, and it's that people ought to be vigilant, and they ought to be sharing that kind of information, but to create an obligation, just, I hate putting additional obligations on volunteer board. Is that okay?
I'll have to turn my secret recording off.
yeah,
Sorry.
I just, so we're asking whoever the executive director is to handle a board member situation.
Just to report it to the chair.
Okay, just to report it to the chair. And then the chair can, okay,
The chair shall notify the entity.
yeah, for sure.
I think
Okay.
that, I think
That's
that's
on
another provision, exactly.
Yeah.
Okay,
I think,
okay,
as you
okay.
pointed out, these are hand in glove. I
Okay.
broke these apart into different groups, this is one of those cases where
Sure.
So who would he notify if it was the chair? Just for,
Yeah.
not to throw you under the bus or anything, but, yeah.
The council, that could be a term.
Okay. Okay.
I just, yeah, there's nothing to prevent anybody from reporting.
Telling anybody.
situations.
Okay.
I just didn't like creating obligations,
Now, I understand.
because then,
Sorry about that.
all right, this is the idea about having a budget workshop. Present the annual budget. I'll just let you read it, but this is something I thought we probably ought to talk about. I don't know if it's controversial or not.
What is it, staff?
Well,
We already do that typically.
they
We
might
do
be-
that
Don't
at least 60
say.
days out. We do it in mid-July typically. So that's,
No, hold on.
but this is,
What's that?
No, this, we don't do this.
This
Oh,
is
to
the
the
one-
staff?
This
To city
requires us
staff,
to go
okay.
out to each city and present, or have the members of the cities come in, which can be challenging at times. And my own concern about this, if a city asks us, if one of the board members says, hey, let's get you on the agenda and go present, I just did this with the city of Denton, that's not an issue. Where it can become an issue is the time that we have available to get, that this entity has to get through the budget workshop or process. And if we can't get on an agenda for a city council, then it could create a challenge. So it means that we'll likely have to lengthen the process to make sure that we not only go out to the cities, but then the cities are now have input into the budget process, which is fine, but then we have to make sure that we funnel that back to the board. So my suggestion would be,
It's not
my
just
suggestion
45
would be
days,
keep it
it's
through the representatives of the board, which already have the member cities that are available. If you wanna,
And it's
when-
an
bring
open,
your city
any of those,
manager.
right, any of those meetings, city representatives could attend. Because otherwise, in order to present to all of those entities, we would have to have meetings with the board prior to that to have a final-ish budget to then be able to provide to each of the entities
At the busiest time. of
Yeah.
the
at their
year.
busiest time as well, during everyone's busiest budget time.
So just a budget workshop with the board, 45 days, period.
We do that.
Yeah, we do that.
And if the
that.
city, if your representatives, your city manager, your CFOs
CFO.
wanna come and listen
They
in
can
on
come.
that, then they should come.
That makes perfect sense to me.
My preference is to allow the board to govern and make decisions on behalf of whatever's coming through here, whether it be a cost model, cost allocate. What could potentially happen is one of you are not at the meeting, your CFO or city manager are, they give input, which may not be congruent with your direction. So it could potentially cause us to be getting direction that may not be the position of you as a board member. So
Yeah.
my preference would be to work everything that we do through the board.
Does this give us enough time to have a meeting, chew through the budget, make changes, and come back and do a second pass?
Well, it's just saying at least 45 days,
This is, the way I interpret this is it's specific to ensuring that DCTA, this requirement, the way I read it, DCTA shall go out to the cities, to each member city, and provide a briefing on the budget 45 days before.
What's the benefit at all of creating this obligation in the bylaws? I mean, I understand the first sentence, gotta do that. Why do we want to create a deadline and put it in our bylaws at all?
Going and seeing the cities.
Right.
And, I
Or
mean,
doing
ideally,
it-
we should be doing that as an entity regardless, right? We should be going out to see every stakeholder that we can and hopefully presenting them a budget, presenting them our goals, our
Sure.
agenda.
Do that.
Yeah, we should be doing that throughout the year.
Right.
So putting this into the
But putting it in
calendar
the
of approving the
bylaws.
budget.
Yeah, I mean, I agree as a matter of public outreach, it's a good idea, but I don't even know why when you think about that, like, if there were big legislative changes or something major we had a major opportunity to acquire some property or something, we may not want to do a budget workshop 45 days. That would be a very unusual circumstance, but you might want to do it 30 days. Why are you putting it in the bylaws at all? I mean, we can tell Raymond, we want a workshop 90 days ahead. You know,
When you say we, you talking about the board?
the board, yeah.
Okay, I think this is more addressing to go out to the member cities and to the county to say, hey, we're gonna make a formal budget presentation 45 days prior. What I've heard you say is, we should be having any deadline or obligation for us to go out to, to go out to the member cities 45 days prior to the budget adoption because of the time frame, because of the difficulty. I mean, I'm okay with taking this out for the member cities but I would like to have, what's been the practice for getting the budget prepared before because I know with cities, I mean, we're looking at that budget for 2 or 3 months at least. I think when we looked at this last budget in here, sometimes it felt very compressed. And so and maybe that was just because of all the changes in general.
I think that was the changes in general.
Yeah, and
So
so
we
I'm gonna
started
go with that, but.
So I'm gonna kind of step back a second on I would be really interested to see a public meeting somewhere in this 90 to 45-day window that there's been outreach to all the potential shareholders and said, hey, this is where we're going with the budget. Y'all, we're having an open meeting for public comment. I think that would be.
We hold a public hearing. We held the public hearing at the August board meeting. We publish it in the paper. Could we do more to advertise prior to? Sure. We don't do any like specific marketing campaigns. We advertise in the newspaper. We post it on our website, that sort of thing. But there's a specific public hearing dedicated to the budget, separate from like the initial public comment that's in a board meeting that we do every year as part of that. Now, could we? I would say it will be very much a challenge to go out to 4 different entities and schedule that with staff.
No,
now,
that's why
could
I'm
we
saying
like
we provide a
proactively
meeting and say it's here
Yes.
and y'all,
Right.
you all come.
Right. And could we extend that to city staff? We've always worked
Right.
through the board, and if they chose to bring city staff, that was fine, but we could be more proactive in
Yes.
including city
And
staff
I-
in that.
And to your point, Mayor, that I want to make sure that we're always ensuring that we're giving the board the opportunity to make changes all the way up to, so if we go out and present, we may be presenting something that you might change, and therefore there might be a discrepancy. And so that's my interest
Yeah.
in saying, let's run it through the board. We do already hold a public, and we post it and say, this is a public hearing, so anybody that wants to listen or hear about our budget, we walk them through it. We have that opportunity. Now, we may want to make that meeting a little bit earlier, so it gives them ample opportunity to provide feedback, but I do get concerned, having worked other places and here, that our budget schedule to allow the iterations that we go through, trying to pack that type of thing in the last 45 days, I don't think works.
I think what I'm hearing is, I mean, we're talking about a lot of different things, but
Right.
what I'm hearing is the consensus that the only line in this section, if it's there, is the authority shall prepare an annual budget. Everything after that, I'm not hearing anybody's in agreement with 45 days to all the member cities. Am I right on that?
Yes, that's a
Okay,
And
so,
my concern is that this is in there, and this may be paranoia. I really want the lawyers in this area to tell me, if you haven't complied with this bylaw and it has an affirmative requirement that you do all this, then someone says you didn't pass your budget in accordance with your bylaw, you
And then
don't
you
have a
default.
budget.
Yeah, you default to the previous year's budget.
Yeah.
So I think we're saying
I mean,
we
so,
can
like,
get rid of
don't
everything
create a
except
trap
the
for
first
yourself.
sentence.
So there may be a policy conversation
Yes.
offline here to
Sure.
say we want a public meeting to be held at a certain amount. What the other piece of this that I don't want to, and I'm gonna give you a personal story, is that there's a particular ISD that shall go unnamed that I sat in a meeting with, and I watched their board of trustees be told, here is your budget, this is your first look at it, and oh, by the way, if you don't pass it tonight, we are in violation of state law because it is available, it has to be done by tomorrow.
Well, that's why we have the staff that we have.
Yeah.
And,
So I don't ever wanna
Yeah.
get so backed up that
Same.
we're in that situation, so.
Well, to be consistent, would we not want it to say, shall pass a budget before or by September 30th? That's our fiscal year.
can we just leave it, yeah, let's just,
Yeah, just leave it.
we're gonna pass an annual budget and the board will decide, and part of the board's responsibility is to make their entities aware of, hey, we're having an open board meeting, you need to show up, I need my CFO there. So,
We'll follow their requirements or our staff.
Absolutely.
Make sure
Our
it's
staff is
consistent.
restricted, the city
Right.
staff, that's kind of what we default to. Fine.
Yeah, but definitely a policy where we go, hey, board has gone through a couple of iterations, this is where we
Yes.
think we are.
Yeah.
All of
I
our
feel more
state
comfortable.
shareholders, let's get in here.
You can't make somebody,
No.
My point was the same thing. I was afraid this could be an unintentional inadvertent default, even though you've done everything you, so, yeah.
I think
No,
we're
I
good.
just want to say, because I do think I hear what you're saying, Raymond. If you don't put a date certain that it has to be out there, everything else backs up from there and you've got to get it out and whatever. If you don't put a date,
Yeah.
you could go for years without a budget.
Section 1 before it does
Okay.
have the date,
Okay,
does have the fiscal year ending date.
Okay,
so
I
the
didn't pull
dates
that part.
in
Okay.
section 1.
We got that in
Okay.
legislation.
perfect.
It's in
All right, good.
legislation.
All right.
Okay, so I'm hearing that the new language, maybe not, All right. Cost of service and efficiency analysis. And this, I think, didn't fit on one slide, so you may want to look on the handout. It's got all the language in one place. This is a new edition that would go in toward the back of the draft bylaws.
Which handout is that on? This one?
Yes, sir. No.
The PowerPoint presentation? Okay, gotcha.
It's on page 12.
Yeah, I couldn't squeeze it onto it, but it's all in one place here, if you want to read it.
So they analyze it and then what? I guess I'm trying to figure out what do you do with the analysis?
Adjust your rates.
I know, is there something that says, and then it will be, acted upon, or?
It's not.
I mean,
Okay.
I see this more as a board policy than bylaws.
I see this more as stuff that these people are doing all the time. But to ask them to step aside and produce this, I think you're taking an awful lot away from the work you need to be doing.
So, I want to take a step back. This is just trying to get efficiency numbers, right? How much are we subsidizing different services, those types of things. When did that information stop being presented to the board? Because there was a time when it was presented to the board regularly.
Presume it's something that you all would have a keen interest in.
Well, this language is, I think those are two different things.
Well,
I agree, I'm not disagreeing with what you're saying.
Yeah, and I'm just, it gets to the question of that this is burdening staff. There was a time when staff provided, maybe not this, but they provided the outcome that this is looking for, in my opinion.
Benchmark, yeah, basically the benchmark.
Yeah, this route is being subsidized by X dollars, or it had this much in grant money applied to it. These are the rates. When did that stop?
I don't know that we stopped. I'm not exactly sure what you're.
Okay, I'll have to pull up an example of it. I didn't bring one with me, but I know that there was very specific data sets that were given to the board on a monthly basis.
Yes.
That they're not given anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't know when that stopped, if it was years ago, months ago, whatever. I just know in my conversations of dealing with folks that have been involved with this agency over the years,
Yes.
that's one of the, and that's why this conversation, I think,
Yeah.
has been brought up.
I think, and this is a big group to have that conversation, not an issue, I can have it.
Right.
I just don't want to take too much time away from what we need to accomplish today, but I will say that the way we were reporting wasn't necessarily giving the board the type of information that was needed.
Gotcha.
We spent a lot of time producing quarterly reports, but the issue with quarterly reports is in this industry, especially with the way we're structured with two universities that are out during the summer, you have big changes
Right.
in ridership, big changes in cost, and we would inevitably have conversations about, well, why did ridership, why did the cost per passenger drop so much? And it was usually due to seasonality
Sure.
changes, and so the real question is, with the cost analysis and benchmarks, is what are the right benchmarks? And we're going to be doing that through this transformational structure, right, this efficiency analysis. But when I look at the cost of service and efficiency analysis, and what I think we're being asked to do, this initial process, bringing consultants in, looking at your cost of service, how you do business, is a great thing to do. The question is, do you want to do that? Do you really want to be bringing consultants in every 2 years, or should that be the board's discretion to say, well, probably minimally every 5 years, you should certainly be doing it. But the question really is, how prescriptive do you want, in my opinion, when I read it, is like, how prescriptive is this? Do you want to have that same type of analysis, or do you want to have the ability as a board to suggest, and I think this is more policy than it is bylaw, because by bylaw it says you will do this efficiency study, and then if we're going to do that, I want to make sure that A, B, C, and whatever else is in here, that we know exactly what that means and how much cost is associated with doing that versus the savings that you get from doing it.
Well, and I'm just gonna put on my public sector hat here and say,
We should be doing it all the time.
yeah, my private sector hat, and then say it should be monthly. So this, every 2 years is like way too long for me. It's not responsive enough, to what goes on in the market. I mean, when I'm talking about garbage trucks and routing and all that stuff, I know my seasonality.
Sure.
I know exactly how much that guy costs. I know labor market changes because there's seasons where people are getting pulled out into the oil field versus not. I mean, we got all of that data, and it's ridiculous. Now, of course, Fortune 201 company, different animal, but that efficiency analysis, at least until we, I think, get our feet under us as a board on that data.
I think staff conducting that, I agree with you. It should be, I mean, it's every day you're looking at these things. We have analysts that should be looking at our cost efficiency and effectiveness. The way, and I'm not sure what the intent of that language was, but what we're doing with the cost efficiency study and analysis is we're bringing, as I presented to this board, is we're going to be bringing some consultants in. We're going to be looking at benchmark studies. We're going to be doing all these things. And so it's a question of, is this staff conducting this, or is the expectation that we're going to be bringing consultants in every 2 years and going through soup to nuts, operations, administration, and that's all I'm suggesting. Yeah.
For me, I think, I've never assumed that this referred to staff doing it. I've always thought that whatever the terms are, whatever the years are, whatever's included or not included in the scope of work,
Yes.
that this would be performed by an outside third-party consultant. So, having said that, I certainly understand that every 2 years may be short, but of course the first one, the one we're working on now,
Right.
is by March 20th, 2020. But I certainly think it should be an outside, and if we need to clarify that in this, it should be an outside consultant. And I don't have a problem maybe looking at some of the scope of work and saying, okay, that can be left to the discretion of the board at the time that that's being considered. But I certainly think the requirement should be in the bylaws to say every 3 or 5 years or something, we need to, because I just think that's good practice. I mean, it's not saying people aren't doing their job. It's not saying that somehow something's wrong. It's just saying, hey, you know, when you're in the trenches, it's hard to sometimes to see exactly what's happening, what's going on. And so I think it's always good to have somebody come in with a different set of eyes. So I've never thought that meant the authority, meaning the staff, would do all that. No, I don't. You wouldn't want to put staff in that position, not only from the work standpoint, but also, you know, again, you want somebody to look at it from the outside, not to say anybody's not doing their job, but it's to say, hey, you know, we deal with this all the time. We're consulting on these issues all the time. So I have some flexibility on maybe what it contains, but I'd hate to take the whole thing out and just make it a pure policy decision. I think it's something that would be good to have every so often. And then the board can decide, based upon the needs at the time, what should that scope of work be. And so that's why I certainly can be persuaded if, you know.
I'm not saying we have agreement on this, but just to capture the change that we're thinking about. So I think we are being kind of thrown off by shop and duck. It really does sound as if it's something right in your lap with your staff. So it's basically either conduct or provide for is what you're saying, I believe there. And then, or maybe just provide for it. Then it says the analysis should include. Are you suggesting maybe it should say may include or could include? You know, some. In other words, you indicated that some of these features could be.
Well, I mean, I think when you look at some of the technological changes and maybe some of the delivery of services for public transportation that are already occurring, that some of these may only apply to certain modes of transit, like fixed bus routes or this or that, and if they can be general enough, and I don't mind keeping them in there, because if they're not in here and you wanna add them into a consultant's report, does that mean you can do it or you can't? Or if you don't find that it's necessary, how prescriptive do you wanna be with that list? And I'm certainly open to
Maybe keep the
discussion.
first sentence pretty short, and then you say per your financial policies and insert your, more detail, your bottom portion through your financial policies section in there.
And we approve bylaws, or we bring, not bylaws, I'm sorry, financial policies to the board annually. We have that slated for next board meeting, as well as the investment policy that's reviewed annually by our investment advisors. So some of this, like the first, or the last bullet in the first section, the review of fiscal policies, including fund balance policy, that's something that we'll present and discuss with you all next month anyways as part of financial policies. We have a compensation study that we incorporate into the financial policies per board direction every 3 years. So I would kind of wonder if some of this should be more part of the financial policies conversation, or in addition to that, separate from.
You're not gonna get any
bylaws,
argument
but-
from us. I think it is healthy to look at, I mean, even our service standards suggest that you need to update that every few years. This looks fairly comprehensive, because we're looking at all service administration, all these things. And if it's a consultant to conduct it, my input to this is, yes, we should be doing, that's healthy. The question really was, do you wanna have it in bylaws that it has to happen every 2 years, or should it be minimally within a certain number of years that the board should conduct
I'm
it?
thinking 5 years, and maybe just say something like a comprehensive cost and efficiency study, like that simple.
I like that, to your earlier point, if item F and 1 through 5, because that's more outcome focused, right? You're gonna do some sort of study, and it really should generate these kind of conversations.
Yeah, I mean, but I think that's like a policy level thing, like, and it feels like to me, the time horizon on which we will see results in this kind of business is long. You know, a rail system, public transportation, the outcomes you're measuring take a long time to see. And so this kind of time frame to me looks like you could get in a situation where you're chasing your instruments. You know, like making adjustments and you don't have really good feedback yet on how is this playing out. And also, and this is maybe sarcastic or snarky, I mean, this looks like to me the full consultant employment act, you know, like part of the bylaws. I don't want an obligation to hire third parties to do this. Because, I mean, we've all seen how that plays out. Everybody's got a new great idea all the time, you know, and I don't want, no. I mean, we need a good comprehensive study. We'll do it every 5 years, and we'll make adjustments. And if our staff is not being responsive to the direction of the agency in between, and it's, you know, we can make those decisions too.
Well, but I think what I've heard, and I don't necessarily disagree with what you're saying is, if we want something every 5 years that indicates cost of service and efficiency analysis, whether it's staff or a third-party consultant, and that can be a policy decision at the board level. But what I heard what I heard somebody say was, I think it was.
No, I was saying every 5 years, I think a third party look is good.
Oh, okay.
I'm fine with that being in the bylaws.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but I think less detail and not on a shorter time frame, I would have a problem with.
Well, and say minimally gives you the option as a board to say, hey, we'd like to go ahead and
Yeah,
do
no,
that
I'm
in
good
year
with that.
three. In year 3, because there's been a significant change.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely, you can
So
do
it
that.
doesn't say you can't do it more often if the board directs us to go do an
Yeah.
efficiency study, we're
We'll
gonna do an
do that.
efficiency
Sure.
study every year.
Yeah.
If you want us to do it, I just don't.
If we were gonna say we shall do it at least every 5 years, I'm fine with that. A shorter time frame, I'm just telling you, I think that would be a mistake, to make it a requirement.
So if I'm hearing this, maybe we simply describe a comprehensive cost of service efficiency analysis, not any less frequently than every 5 years.
I feel more comfortable with a 3-year time horizon, just for my.
3 years.
Do I hear 4? Do I hear?
Yeah.
Well, and there's some art to this, right? I mean, you've got cities that do 20-year plans and 10-year plans, and nobody does a 5-year plan, because you can't really see. But I think, yes, we deal with long time horizons, but I also think that to be fiscally responsible, we need to have good, fresh data. And, you know, over a 5-year, that's a lot of fiscally responsibility that I may not have a good beat on.
But we could always ask
Yeah.
for it before the 5 years. We're
Only
just
have to get
saying
2 more
no
votes
longer
to get
than,
it
no
Yeah.
longer than 5 years.
But we've had that argument before. We don't want to have the board being asked all the time. We instead just put a trigger in, so.
Is this
One
a,
time I would like to hear, just Randall, what did Dark do? I'm just curious.
trying to remember.
This one
I just am curious.
No, they had an automatic, I don't remember the time frame though. I really don't remember, but they did have some kind of automatic trigger to read.
Okay, I was just curious.
Yeah, yeah.
like,
So, I mean, it's a good
Is
idea.
there a
Yeah.
standard?
I couldn't tell you exactly what the date was.
I'm a 5-year.
I could be persuaded to go with 4. If you can convince Diane, you know, then I, you know. But you'll have to meet with her privately.
I will just say, I think part of, and I know about the long time horizon, but part of, I think, why we began this discussion back a year ago was looking at a set of data that was over about a 7 or 8 year period, but yet within 2 or 3 or 4 years, you could see some things in the data that caused you to go, we need to take a look at something. So that's really the reason why I'm 3, 4, 5. For me, it would be in the beginning, a shorter term would be preferable. And as things begin to really stabilize, and then you can always come back and change it. When I mean shorter, I mean 3 or 4 or something. 5, I'd have to really, I'd have to sit here and think about it till the rest of the time we're spending on this to when we vote on it. And that's something we really haven't talked about. When we vote on the bylaws, what's the standard for the voting as far as,
That's a great question. It's obviously governed by your existing bylaws.
Okay.
Which is a different definition than your financially participating entities, but I think it's a super important.
okay.
It's a good question.
3/5.
I was just curious.
Let me just add that I would feel more comfortable with anything over 3, and here's the reason. And this is.
So not 3.
It could be 3 to 5.
Okay, okay.
No, I don't think we should wait more than 5 years to do it, but somewhere between 3 and 5 would be my preference. And one of the reasons for that, and I'm sure you've heard a lot of this at Dark, because I said it sometimes, is that when you make service changes, so we're going to do this transformation, we're going to bring consultants in. This is going to be probably the most comprehensive thing, transformational thing this agency did next to building route rail, because we're going to look at all this technology, we're going to be changing service strategy and plans and technology and all these opportunities that the consultants will hopefully help us with. But to try to make all those changes at once certainly is not a wise decision to make. When you make these changes, and I think this is statistically proven, that even if you make a small change or a large change, there's typically a negative impact on ridership. And the negative impact can be as much as 2 years, is what the industry typically says, correct? So my tendency to say, let's not make it too often, is we can make changes, spend a lot of money with consultants to do it. It may take us 18 months or 2 years to implement all the changes that we want to make, because trying to change an entire city or 3 cities at once isn't going to make sense. So we may want to stagger the implementation, and you're not even through the implementation before you have your consultants coming back in and doing another study. So that's why I'm thinking,
Which is your point.
that we might want to make sure that we give whatever changes we make the opportunity to actually take hold, review them. And internally we provide statistics and benchmarks. My hope is that once we get the consultants through here, we'll know what everybody will feel comfortable. It's like, what are our performance measures that we're going to report on every month, and we move forward with that aspect of it. Does that help? What, so why I was thinking it was more than 2
Yeah.
years.
So you guys good with 4?
I like three.
What will you live with 4? Because I think I heard 4, 4. Maybe.
I'll agree to 4.
I'm just trying to get us going here. And if we feel really strongly, we can.
You know me, I'm all about shortening the time frames.
It's not that something can't be done in that shorter time period, it's just that that doesn't have to be done. But if there's any issue that you feel, hey, I'm not comfortable with this, we certainly can bring it up.
But I may not be here in 4 years.
But we're doing
What's
one
wrong
now,
with
right?
you?
I know, right?
We're doing one now, right?
Yes,
We're doing one now.
Yeah.
So you wanna control things after you're gone?
I'm done.
Don't we all?
No, we don't all want to
There's a
control.
name for that that starts with an N.
You don't have a will?
Yes.
No, I.
You don't have a will?
I have a will. You
then
can
okay,
have the
just
money
say
you
it.
want to do with what you want.
Are we good
If,
with
if
four?
5 doesn't
No.
work,
I have a
I'll say
will,
that
not a
even
trust.
the feds, every 3 years, the
I'm gonna-
feds do
We're
a
not-
triennial review.
No longer than.
What, Mayor?
Well, I mean, based upon that we're gonna do one in 2020, I mean, 5 is too long. If I had my preference, it would be 3, because you said 3 or more. And if we wanna change it in 3 years, we can come back and change it. So that's, I think, what I'm gonna have to stick with, just because, I mean, 3 years is pretty good time frame. And if somehow we don't wanna do that, we can change it before the 3 years. I would feel better taking a more conservative approach to it, at least at this stage of the game, than stretching it out to 4 or 5. So that's sort of where I am.
I'd like to get through the first one and just see how much effort it is.
I mean-
Just put a
We
number
might find
there,
out it's not
we'll
that
decide if
painful.
we read it or not,
Right.
and then we'll make it a pass.
Okay, Paul.
One thing that I haven't heard discussed, and maybe I missed it, but what's the performance period for this study? I mean, it's going on right now, it's gonna be March of 2020, so you're consuming 6 months of this time frame just by having the consultant do their work. So 3 years is really 2.5 years, 4 years is really 3.5 years before these things are actually stepping through. So having been in the middle of some of those things in different roles, I mean, this is the 6-month process probably.
I would also,
Longer.
yeah, I would also add too, just the procurement policy, and because of the cost
Oh, yeah, that's not even talking about
a consultant
procurement.
probably adds another 3 months to that
Yeah,
timeline
so
as well.
you could eat up a year in the procurement and execution of the
Yeah.
study, so 4 years really is kind of 3 years, because at 3 years you say, okay, we gotta do the study, and then the clock starts running, and then 9 months, then
I've seen the clock start running once the data's presented, so it just depends on which way you wanna count the
Yeah,
clock.
Yeah.
just a point for consideration.
Yeah, you can make a 3-year become a 4-year if you count it from when the data's presented versus from when the trigger is pulled.
And I would think if the data, once you present it, should all be in Excel or Access format, and I would think staff would continue those models, if those models just
That's
don't
the
go
idea.
dead, that those models should continue and
Much quicker to.
much quicker, and you
You're not
guys
gonna have the
should,
same time.
right, you should have a good template to what the future's gonna be year after year.
Yeah,
So
you
it's-
built the model.
Right, you're building the model right now, hopefully that model will continue and
To be
you'll
relevant.
keep it a live document.
If you get the software subscription.
Yeah.
Should.
$40,000 every year.
It's
We're
all
not
subscription.
putting
So
in Highland
that's
Village.
maintenance.
And because everybody accepts the data the first time it's presented,
Yeah.
generally without exception.
Yep, yeah, absolutely.
I just wanna make.
That's been our experience in Lake City.
Yeah.
No suspicion about the
Right.
data.
None at all. All right. So we absolutely don't know. Keep going.
I think what we know is that we're gonna simplify what we
Yeah.
say. You know,
For
the
sure.
dispute, or the area for continued discussion is 3 to 4 years, I think.
I think it is just 3 and 4, right? All right. This is good news. I'm not
I mean,
sure. This is all that stands between you
You can get your 9 months.
This is, someone asked this question, and I didn't want to leave anyone's comments out. It was basically just sort of an inquiry about, hey, are there other ways for municipality to support the DCTA other than through the financial participating municipality, which is a wanted to alert you that the question was out there, that there's a question, are there other ways to accomplish this?
Well,
And I hope I'm just as.
There's a great way. It's called contract service. Anybody can participate with us financially. They just can't be on the board.
That's.
Yep,
that's-
yep.
I don't want to ignore whoever it was who submitted this. If there's more to the comment than what I'm saying, then please chime in.
I'll say that because I did put that there. My question is, to become a financially participating municipality, that's up to the municipality to decide how that happens, whether they choose to do a tax levy, whether they choose to do a TERS, or whether they choose to do something different. Maybe they'll take it out of their ad valorem tax. Maybe they'll do something different. I don't think that's our decision. It's the amount of participation that we're concerned with.
Doesn't the
And that's-
statute regulate that? I think the statute regulates that.
It does. Right now, the statute, it's A or B.
Right.
Oh, okay, well then that's not an issue.
I do want to go back to, forgive me for doing this, but on the last slide, on the efficiency study, Sam had made a comment about simplifying the scope of work, and so I'm not sure exactly what that means. So I'm okay with looking at some options on that, but I didn't want to necessarily say, yeah, I'm totally okay with it.
Well, I mean, all I was saying is you just say a comprehensive cost and efficiency analysis and leave it at that.
Yeah.
Because what that could include could actually be more comprehensive than this list. But you may want it to be
You don't wanna
less if
exclude
you
it
have, if you're
before you
tracking
do it.
these data points, you don't. And so you don't, and that can be a policy legislation.
Like
We'll come
flying
back and
cars.
talk about that once we get to
Exactly.
that.
I mean, that would be a reason to do another study.
Yeah, I think
We
the
have
should
flying
include,
cars.
raise the question in my mind, you know, what if that question just isn't really something you're all that interested in? But anyway.
Okay, sorry for that.
No, you're good.
Apologize.
So, we'll come back with some stuff on that. We've got a couple of other things. You happen to know what the things we promised to come back on?
With the open items, or
Yes,
just the
exactly.
changes we're making?
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
You'll be telling all the other lawyers, you think you have it now.
Thank you, David.
Definition of financially participating municipality, we're gonna
Right.
add some meat to that provision.
And that shouldn't be controversial. It's just making sure I've migrated all the information from the statute into the bylaws.
We were gonna set out categories for what executive committee sessions would be open to non-voting members, and which ones would not be open to them. We were gonna set particular categories, and so we'll create that list.
You might also maybe have some other things we need to try to, avoiding having to make a decision on that ad hoc basis.
Yeah, and then just whether or not the last issue about 3 or 4 years for the study.
So that's pretty darn good.
I think that's really
Yeah, I think you were gonna, I've got on here a note, definition of professional. I thought you were gonna work on that a little
Yes, I'm
bit.
sorry, yes,
Yes.
yes, we did talk about that. We put that in. I thought that was a.
And the conflict of interest, I think you were gonna work on a redraft or something.
That's gonna be printed out, and
Okay.
it's gonna, you have one broader statement, pick up successor status.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was focusing on the things where I didn't.
You didn't have, we, yeah, we
Yeah.
still had outstanding to come in and,
I
okay,
think
gotcha.
we have agreement on
Yeah.
those, but I do have work to do. So, here we are.
That's easy, man.
So next steps, as it relates to the next draft that you all review, the assumption is that all of the agreed upon items that we identified today will not be part of the discussion at the next meeting and part of the review and feedback period with that third draft.
I reserve the right to discuss any of it.
So that was the original discussion and intent behind that, so.
So, but we will get, we will be able to see a draft of what is
Yes.
Not an issue, it's not
Yes.
not up for discussion, but it's been agreed to.
Yes.
And so we'll see that, and somehow that'll be identified, and then we'll have the issue.
You'll get a complete black line.
Okay.
You'll see every comma, everything that got moved or changed based on the discussion.
Okay, and then the ones that were still outstanding to talk about, then those will be delineated
I
somehow.
think I'm gonna have to figure out a way to segregate
Okay,
those out.
that's what I, yeah.
Best I can do. Sign it if you want.
Thank you so much. You know,
Thank
we,
you.
Thank you.
Frank.
Yeah, thank you.
we said it wasn't, completing everything wasn't a sign of anything other than we were going meticulously down, and thank you so much for facilitating it. David, thank you for meticulous notes, and Lindsay, thank you. Lindsay. She's like, I'm exhausted.
Go get it.
Let's go again. So he's
We might go in.
consent agenda.
Yeah. When was it supposed to start again?
And the next thing we do is
Move to approve.
Can we move it all to the consent
we
agenda?
gotta do this, right? So, I'm gonna have no me estás diciendo que voy a hacer. Thank you, Frank, so much.
Thank you.
Boy, he was good.
That's beginning one of his real
Okay,
first
so,
because
we have lots of things to go over, and so, kind of our next, agenda item here is public comment. And I do have 3, citizen, comment cards requests. Brandy, are you ready?
I am ready. Jen wants to go last though.
Jim, you are last. And because we are pressed for time, we're gonna need to go into our executive, session quickly, because we have someone here that needs to be involved in that, and she needs to leave. So, unfortunately, we're gonna kinda have to adhere to our 3-minute rule here. So, okay, all right, so, first we have Victoria, is it Marie Allen? Okay, oh, okay. Okay, Paula Richardson? Come on, lady.
Agree.
So Paula, just give us your address and.
Sure, it's 9613 Pepperwood Trail, Denton, 76207.
Thank you. Yeah. Go ahead. Yes, ma'am.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Paula Richardson. I have been a bus operator since 1990. I have been at DCTA for 4 years. I would like this opportunity to be the voice of my fellow operators. Also, complaints from the public are numerous, and I'm going to speak about some of those. The most frequently heard are that the bus schedules are extremely difficult, complex, stressful, and unpopular because they are so disorganized. There is not enough time allowed to get to each stop. Stops are missing from our schedules, which causes us to fall further behind schedule. Traffic, which is cars, pedestrian, and schools, were not factored into our schedules, which causes rider alerts being sent out, many, on a daily basis. There are a lot of routes that end in the middle of the route. which is upsetting to our customers because they have to disembark and figure out how to complete their trip. In this past Sunday's Denton Record Chronicle, a story was titled Run, Ryder, Run. In it, Troy Rayleigh, business manager, bus operations and maintenance and creator of our schedule, said he expects the buses to get held up more often at the start of the school year, particularly at UNT. If that's the case, why wasn't time factored into the schedules to accommodate this? And this won't be at the beginning of the school year, it's throughout the school year. Another issue is that routes that were bid on do not match what is presented to us when we get our schedules each day. Because in many instances, times don't match. For example, if I picked a route that started at 11:40 a.m. and then I get my schedule when it comes in, it might say I clock in at 11:23 a.m., which causes you to be late from the start of your route. Other mistakes in a lot of schedules is that you might clock in at 12:45 p.m. Then you're supposed to be at your first stop at 12:51. This is not enough time to do your pre-trip, which is 15 minutes, and travel time to your first stop.
Paula,
that
40
also
more
causes
seconds.
delays.
20 more seconds.
Okay. Basically, I want to say that the schedules and maintenance are contributing to a lot of these issues. The drivers and the public would like DCTA to go back to the way the schedules were before.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, and Mr. Owen.
Paula drove on the streets of LA for 23 years. She knows what she's talking about. I'd just like to reiterate what she was saying about the schedule. I was hired and trained at DART in 2011, when Randall was the chairman. Then I came about a month later and I got hired by DCTA because I live in Denton. And I've been through 21 schedules, summer, fall, spring. The schedule that was put out, this one we're in now, is the absolute worst schedule we've ever had. Probably because it was generated by Remix, which is a computer program. They paid $250,000 for it. And it does not, I'll give you an example. It'll give you 2 minutes to get from here to here, and it won't factor in that there's 3 street lights between those 2 minutes. It's not working. Okay? And the problem is, it's causing concern with the customers, it's causing concern with the drivers. We've lost 12 CDL drivers since this transition. Only 2 of them were fired. They saw the schedule, which was hidden from us until the last minute, and they weren't happy with it. One woman got off the bus with kids on it, left, called Uber, took a ride back to the BOM, and took her car and left. So that's a factor. The other factor I want to talk about is when you eliminate routes 1, 2, and 3, you're eliminating 115 stops. You're eliminating in Route 1, 29, Route 2, 47, and Route 3, 39. Some of the richest and the poorest sections of town in Denton, okay? And on Route 2, there's 13 shared transfer stops. That's the hospital, the regional hospital, and a lot of other things. Med Park, you name it. Okay, that's enough to say about that. Let me tell you something about your executive sessions. I've been attending these meetings for 7 years. Not once did Charles or any of them come back and say, we had this meeting and this is what we decided. It was never, nothing was ever decided. Because I was usually the only one here. Okay? So, and the other thing is, I would like to see, I thought it was a mistake to do away with the committees. I would like to see that somehow or another that you reinstate the finance committee, call it what you will, have Connie as the chairman, because she asks the best questions as far as the economics and the financials. And like I say, when you're buying 12 small buses, they got a 15-gallon gas tank. The ones you got down at Louisville now, they don't last the whole shift. You can only have 12 people on the bus, two wheelchairs, and a driver. You can't have standees. And you got standees going to Hebron right now, violating FTA law.
Okay, Jim, time up, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, sir. Okay. Because we have someone here that needs to be involved in our executive session, we're going to go ahead and we're going to convene into executive session right now. The board will convene the regular board meeting into closed executive session for the following. B, as authorized by section 5510712 of the Texas Government Code, consultation with general counsel regarding duties and responsibilities of NTMC and the collective bargaining agreement with NTMC and Amalgamated Transit Union Local 1338 effective April 1st, 2018. And C, is authorized by section 551072 of the Texas Government Code, the Board of Directors meeting may be convened into closed executive session for the purpose of deliberation regarding real property, discussion, acquisition, sale, or lease of real property related to long-range service plan within the cities of Denton, Louisville, Highland Village, or the A-Train corridor. So we will go into executive session at 3:35.